everyone, welcome back to the Murder Tapes podcast, Season 4, Episode 3. Wilson and I went to the UT game with his mom and some friends this weekend, and it was a lot of fun. I also made some new graphics for the podcast, which is why the cover is different now if you haven't noticed. And the stickers that I made finally came in as well, and I'm so excited to leave them at coffee shops for y'all to have. We will be doing some giveaways, so be sure to follow our Instagram in order to stay updated at Murder Tapes Podcast. This case broke my heart, and I actually found out about it through Instagram. I follow the Innocence Project, and almost everyone I follow was reposting this story. That's because an innocent man was wrongfully convicted and unfortunately put to death on September 24th, 2024, before I finished this episode. That man's name is Marcellus Khaliifah Williams. The woman he was wrongfully convicted of murdering was 42-year-old Felicia Anne Gayle Pikus. She was born on February 6, 1965 in Rockford, Illinois, to Veronica and George Gayle. Felicia was the second born of 8 children, and her family gave her the nickname Leisha. According to everyone that knew her, she was known for her kind-heartedness. Felicia began her education at Bloom Grade School before moving on to Guilford High School. She took an active role in the student council, joined the National Honor Society, and contributed to the high school newspaper called The Voyager. After graduation in 1974, she furthered her education at the University of Illinois, and she got her bachelor's degree in journalism. Then, in 1980, she got married to her high school sweetheart, Daniel Pikus. Daniel has since become a radiologist. Felicia and Daniel had been married for 18 years until her death on August 11, 1998. Throughout Felicia's life, she tutored children, protested for human rights, as well as the environment, and was known to be a strong feminist. According to the community she lived in, she would take the kids she tutored home and make cookies with them. She also took them to the opera and had strong bonds with all of their families. Unfortunately, her and her husband never got to have kids of their own. She worked for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch from 1981 to 1992. And while there, she set up an eternal recycling program that is still being used today. In fact, Ellen Gardner, the assistant managing editor that hired her, said she was always advocating for the things she believed in. Felicia and Daniel lived in a private subdivision of Ames Place. The community was gated and located in University City, a suburb in St. Louis. Her husband Daniel would arrive home from work on August 11, 1998, to find his wife Felicia dead. I'm now going to read directly from the police report on how police officers found her, and it's important to note that this document has since been redacted. Quote, "Upon arrival, we entered the residence through an open rear west door. We found the victim lying on the floor in the front foyer of the residence near the north front door. The victim was lying in a fetal position on her left side and was covered in blood. A large kitchen butcher's knife was protruding from the right side of her neck. We noticed her head to be to the north and her feet to be to the south. The victim was wearing only a blood-soaked purple t-shirt that was around her upper chest. Immediately, we noticed 2 stab wounds to the victim's upper back, 1 stab wound to her right thigh, 2 stab wounds to her neck, and numerous defensive wounds to her arms and hands. The victim also had a major gash to her right elbow. When we initially entered the residence, we were in a small family room. We immediately went to our left and entered the kitchen. Upon entering the kitchen, we saw a cardboard knife sheath labeled Chicago Cutlery on the floor near a hallway that led to the front foyer/living room area. Near the knife sheath was what appeared to be a bloody shoe imprint. A kitchen counter drawer near the kitchen sink was found open. The drawer contained several Chicago Cutlery brand knives and silverware. On the stove were several empty plastic grocery bags. Found on the kitchen counter were several miscellaneous personal papers, a 16-ounce Bud Light empty beer bottle, a black portable radio with AM/FM, a tape player, and bananas. We found the dishwasher door open with no dishes in it. we noticed a wooden kitchen table with 4 wooden chairs to have 2 of its chairs to be pulled away from the table. On the table, there was one key ring with several keys lying on top of a small stack of newspapers. Upon exiting the kitchen, we noticed what appeared to be a bloody shoe imprint. The imprint was located in the hallway just north of the kitchen door that led to the front foyer/living room area. Sergeant Allen used a piece of paper from the recipe table in the kitchen to mark the footprint's location. In the dining room, we saw an empty clear plastic bag on the floor next to the living room table. There were several stacks of newspapers on the table. In the front foyer, there are 6 steps leading up to a small landing, then an additional 9 steps leading to the second floor. On the landing leading upstairs, blood splatters could be seen on the step and west wall, but no further than the 3rd step from the landing. A search of the upstairs rooms revealed no suspects or other immediate items of evidence. While searching the upstairs rooms, nothing appeared to be disturbed. In the front foyer, we found blood splatters on the steps, north and west walls, and on the radiator, which is located in the northwest corner of the foyer. A clear plastic drinking bottle with a red lid and drinking straw was located on the front foyer floor near a wooden coat rack. The coat rack contained 1 blue baseball cap, 1 green basketball cap, 2 brown baseball caps, and 1 blue umbrella with a tan handle. The clear plastic drinking bottle and coat rack also had several blood splatters on them. We found the north front door to be closed. The deadbolt lock on the door was unlocked. There were no keys in the deadbolt lock near the north front door. A pane of glass next to the deadbolt lock was broken out by an unknown object. The north front screen door was closed with no visible signs of damage. Sergeant Allen said upon her arrival at the residence, she tried the front screen door only and noticed a pane of glass on the north main door missing. Sergeant Allen said upon her noticing the missing glass, she immediately left the north front porch. Sergeant Allen said after she discovered the deceased victim, she made the necessary notifications to Captain Fisher and Detective Captain Keller. The basement of the residence was searched by P.O. Lawrence. He advised that the basement was secure and no suspects were found. While searching the residence, the following lights were observed to be in the on position: the kitchen, living room, front foyer, second floor bathroom, and the attic lights. All other lights in the residence were off. Upon first entering the residence and finding no signs of life from the victim, all officers and University City paramedics were advised to leave in order to protect the evidence. The front, rear, and sides of the residence were roped off with police tape. P.O. Lawrence was posted in the rear of the residence and P.O. White was posted at the front of the residence to prevent entry into the crime scene area. Upon arrival of the detectives, the scene was released to them. Captain Keller contacted the medical examiner in the St. Louis County Crime Scene Unit, and that was the end of the now redacted report. Some things to note is that the bloody shoe prints found on the scene didn't belong to Felicia or her husband. There were also bloody fingerprints at the scene. Head and pubic hairs were taken from Felicia's shirt and from the rug she was found on that was recently cleaned. Blood and skin was also recovered from her fingernails. Before her death, she had showered upstairs, and it was known that after her run, she would shower and put on the same purple shirt. It was noted, however, that at some point she went down the stairs and confronted someone that was in the house at the bottom of the steps. As mentioned in the report, her blood trail began on the 3rd step up, and when police found her on the rug, she wasn't wearing pants, just that purple shirt. Her autopsy would reveal that she was stabbed 43 times with her own butcher knife, and 7 of them were fatal. The butcher knife was twisted into her neck and sticking out. This was an interesting discovery because on July 18th, just a couple of months earlier, a woman named Deborah McLean was found in a similar way. Someone broke into her home, stabbed her with a knife from her own kitchen, and the knife was sticking out of her neck. She lived only 3 miles away from Felicia, but in a lower income area and in an apartment instead of a house. This was shocking to lots of people in Felicia's community because they assumed their gated community was safe. Aside from the fact that Felicia had a professional career and Deborah worked at Walgreens, they were very similar. Felicia was 42 and Deborah was 40. Both of them had the same build and long brown hair. And, as mentioned earlier, they had been stabbed the same number of times in the same areas. There also wasn't much that was messed up at both scenes. Both of their purses were stolen, both of them tried to fight off their attacker, and the St. Louis County Medical Examiner, Dr. Mary Case, believed these cases had the same perpetrator. It seemed to be the work of a serial killer. And I'll get into this later, but lots of investigators thought it was Ted Bundy. It is currently still unsolved. Unfortunately, Deborah didn't get a whole newspaper dedicated to her killing like Felicia did. Instead, she was mentioned in a small section until Felicia's death occurred. The following issue had both of them on it, and people began looking at maps between their homes and the dates. Marcellus Khaliifah Williams was arrested on August 31st, 1998. He was 29 years old at the time and was convicted of robbing a fast food restaurant. He was pending trial and currently incarcerated at St. Louis City Workhouse. He had one son and was a stepfather to a daughter. His criminal record included prior convictions of robbery. While Marcellus was incarcerated, he connected with a man named Henry Cole, a fellow inmate. They were actually related by Marcellus's extended family, and both of them spent lots of time together talking and watching TV from April to June of 1999. Henry was released on June 4th, 1999, and went straight to the police to inform them that Marcellus confessed to killing Felicia. He stated they were both watching the television when the news story appeared and stated they were offering a $10,000 reward. Henry's criminal background spans several decades, with a record that dates back to the 1960s. He has accumulated multiple felony convictions and served time for offenses including theft, robbery, and weapon possession across various states. In addition to his legal issues, Henry has faced significant challenges with substance abuse, regularly using crack cocaine, marijuana, and heroin, while also battling mental health disorders. Prosecutors further revealed that he is HIV positive. According to prosecutors, before Henry provided any information to the police, he asked, quote, "Ain't no way I can get any kind of money at all up front?" To me, this would have already been a red flag, because Henry claimed to know this information, but waited until he got out of prison, more than likely because he needed the money. Henry also recounted that Marcellus had mentioned needing money, which prompted him to travel by bus to University City with intentions to commit a robbery. Roughly 3 months after Henry's police interview, a woman named Laura Asaro was arrested for engaging in sex work. Laura informed the police officers that she had information related to the murder of the woman in University City. However, when detectives came to interview her, she declined to speak, asserting she was merely attempting to evade arrest. After 2 hours of questioning yielded no results, detectives revised their approach 4 days later, suggesting that charges could be dropped in exchange for her cooperation and highlighting a reward for useful information. Prosecutors outlined that after Laura remained unresponsive, detectives revealed that Felicia's husband had posted a $10,000 reward in connection with his wife's death, indicating that she could potentially receive some or all of that money if she helped. This prompted Laura to disclose that she had been living in Marcellus's car at the time of the murder. On the day Felicia was killed, Laura claimed that Marcellus dropped her off at her mother's house before returning home, with blood on his clothes and scratches on his neck. According to her testimony, he disposed of the clothing down a sewer and immediately went to a neighbor's house to exchange Felicia's laptop for crack cocaine. At one point, Laura insisted she had seen the laptop in Marcellus's car, although her accounts regarding the computer, including when it was sold, varied significantly over time. Marcus's cousin testified that he spotted Laura disembarking from a bus near his grandfather's home in August 1998, carrying both the laptop and a purse, as prosecutors reported. It's also important to note that Laura also had a crack cocaine addiction. 10 months later, a neighbor was found in possession of the laptop, but testified in court that no drugs had been exchanged for it. In a sworn affidavit in November 2022, he claimed he purchased the laptop for his daughter, and stated that Marcellus had told him someone had given it to him. The day following Marcellus's bloody return, Laura claimed she discovered Felicia's purse in the trunk of Marcellus's car and suspected infidelity. When she confronted him, Laura testified that Marcellus claimed the purse belonged to a journalist at the Post-Dispatch whom he had just killed, according to prosecutors. However, police never recovered the purse. Defense attorneys for Marcellus argued that the accounts provided by the two witnesses evolved during the investigation and frequently contradicted their narratives. For example, Laura stated that Marcellus threatened to kill her and her family if she told, and that he drove to Felicia's house, but Henry stated he took a bus. Not to mention, both Henry and Laura had mental illnesses, a long rap sheet, and a crack cocaine addiction. Both Henry and Laura died several years ago, and their families told police that they both were known for providing false information for their own benefit. Ed Hobson, a man that dated Laura's mother and knew Laura since she was a child, would say, quote, "She was a known police informant and had engaged in a pattern of lying to the police to get herself out of trouble in the past." Henry's nephew, Derwin Cole, would say, quote, "Everyone in the family knew that Henry made up the story about Marcellus committing the Felicia Gayle homicide." It's important to note that Marcellus was using his grandfather's Buick LeSabre, and it wasn't in perfect condition. In fact, it was completely broken down during the time Felicia was murdered. Laura was the only one that had access to it while Marcellus was incarcerated. I would assume that if this vehicle was running and happened to be at the crime scene, it would be noticed in a gated community. Laura then stated that Marcellus had scratches on his neck. However, it had already been revealed to the public that Felicia scratched the perpetrator. Laura then said that Marcellus traded Felicia's laptop to a man named Glenn Roberts in exchange for crack cocaine, not too long after the murder. Glenn was interviewed by police and admitted that he did take the laptop in exchange, but for money, not crack cocaine. He also stated that Marcellus said he got the laptop from his girlfriend. The serial number from this laptop linked to Felicia's husband, meaning it did belong to them. Glenn was best friends with Marcellus's uncle and lived just up the street from him. So how hard would it be for Laura to ask who they can offer it to in exchange for money without getting herself in trouble? Police never questioned her whereabouts or where she got the laptop from. Laura also informed them that she saw Felicia's state ID in Marcellus's car, but police found her ID in her home. Police still took this claim very seriously and searched his grandfather's Buick. They found a St. Louis Post-Dispatch ruler and calculator that belonged to Felicia, but never her purse or ID. Here's the catch though. These two items had no fingerprints on them and were found in a car that Laura was living in. And keep in mind, that car doesn't work, and she's claiming all of these things a year after the murder. I 100% believe either Laura or someone else planted this evidence. Laura told authorities she would testify in exchange for the dismissal of outstanding warrants against her. She even said she would split the reward money. The red flags just kept popping up. Unfortunately, Marcellus was indicted for the murder of Felicia on January 6, 2000, and the defense sent a request to have the fingerprints found at the scene tested. However, prosecutors stated they couldn't be tested because they were lost. Marcellus's counsel put in a request for more forensic evidence to be tested, but all motions were denied. So the trial began in June of 2001. Prosecutors faced criticism over perceived racial bias in their jury selection process, a key concern in the case against a black male defendant accused of murdering a white female victim. Among the jury pool, the prosecution removed 6 out of 7 qualified black candidates. One black juror was dismissed due to his occupation as a postal worker, a tactic referred to as the Postman Gambit. I'm going to read directly from an article about this tactic and what it means. Quote, St. Louis County prosecutors use a postman gambit to systemically strike black jurors from death penalty cases against black defendants. Dozens of lawmakers and religious leaders claim in a letter to Governor Jay Nixon. Another black juror was struck because he was a postal worker. According to a former prosecutor from St. Louis County, the prosecutor in Smoles is known to have invented the Postman Gambit as a way to eliminate potential Black jurors. The letter states, "Postal workers in St. Louis County are disproportionately African American, and the office used the Postman Gambit as a pretext to strike as many Black jurors as possible." So 64% of St. Louis County's death row inmates are Black, though African Americans are only 24% of the county population. Missouri has been in the news a lot recently regarding its racially biased law enforcement practices. The federal government even issued a report criticizing its disparate treatment of Black residents. NAACP President Mary Ratliff said in a statement, quote, "Excluding and targeting Black people happens in capital cases in St. Louis too, and regardless of one's views about capital punishment, our justice system should not tolerate disparate or unequal treatment, particularly when a life is at stake." Both Henry and Laura testified, and Henry, interestingly enough, admitted that if it wasn't for the $10,000 reward money, he wouldn't have come forward. As I mentioned earlier, Glenn Roberts told police that the laptop came from Laura, and Glenn tried to mention this in court, but the trial judge didn't allow the jury to hear it and ruled it as hearsay. The state argued that the items found in his car were enough to prove his guilt, but they were obviously planted. Once again, Laura was the only one that had access to the vehicle while Marcellus was incarcerated, and lots of witnesses report seeing her in the car, as well as in possession of the laptop bag that seemed to be similar to the one stolen from the crime scene. On top of that, none of the forensic evidence was a match to Marcellus. The bloody shoe print also wasn't his shoe size. The head and pubic hairs weren't a match, and of course, the blood and skin from Felicia's fingernails were also not a match. The most important piece of evidence, the butcher knife, wasn't tested for DNA, which is even crazier to me because the handle had foreign DNA on it. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Marcellus guilty of first-degree murder, first-degree robbery, and 2 counts of armed criminal action. During the sentencing phase on June 19, 2001, the jury took less than 90 minutes, including a lunch break, to conclude that Marcellus should face death by lethal injection. During the sentencing phase, jurors learned about Marcellus, his family background, and his children, though this information was brief. The bulk of the proceedings focused on 25 exhibits, numerous witnesses, and various pieces of evidence detailing an incident that occurred while Marcellus was incarcerated. On the day he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, he was involved in an escape attempt that escalated into a violent altercation with a corrections officer. Reports indicate that another inmate struck a window with a table, leading to a chaotic struggle for escape. The officer allegedly sustained significant injuries, having been struck in the head with a metal rod, resulting in substantial bleeding. Despite this separate incident being unrelated to the charges at hand, the state's attorney emphasized it during the closing arguments for the death penalty, asking the juror to consider Marcellus's actions while in custody. They made it seem like he attempted to escape because he was proving his guilt. Prosecutors need to look at these types of cases in a different way sometimes. Because, for example, Marcellus was convicted of murdering a woman and given the death penalty. Do you think that if you were in his shoes and dealing with this type of racism that stacked all of these lies against you, that you wouldn't try and escape death? Not to mention that bringing up his escape attempt is extremely unfair to his trial, because the court is allowing for something completely separate to be considered in a murder case. However, when his defense asked multiple times for more DNA testing and witness statements, they were denied and labeled as hearsay. They are also not supposed to push more towards a specific view and leave that to a jury. Marcellus first challenged his sentencing on multiple grounds, including the admissibility of evidence, specific testimonies, and inflammatory remarks made during closing arguments. However, his appeal was rejected by the appellate court, which upheld his conviction. In 2003, Marcellus sought to submit another motion for post-conviction relief, asserting that he had received ineffective assistance from his attorney. He contended that his lawyer neglected to test Laura's blood, hair, and fibers that could potentially link her to the crime scene. This motion was later denied by the Missouri Supreme Court in 2005, which reaffirmed his conviction. Marcellus's legal team subsequently pursued federal intervention. In 2006, they asked authorities to perform additional DNA testing on the physical evidence collected from the crime scene, aiming to compare the results with samples from Laura, known felons, and the databases maintained by both Missouri and the FBI. However, the court rejected this motion, stating that there was insufficient justification for the testing and asserting its previous findings during the trial. This appeal was ultimately dismissed, reaching as far as the United States Supreme Court. As a result, Marcellus was assigned an execution date of January 28, 2015. As Marcellus faced imminent execution, a glimmer of hope emerged with the discovery of new evidence. Male DNA had been identified on the handle of the murder weapon, yet it had never undergone testing. In response, his attorney submitted a petition seeking the appointment of a special master to supervise the DNA analysis of this new evidence. They requested that the DNA be tested and compared to potential samples linked to the unsolved murder of Deborah. The court granted a stay of execution and appointed a special master. However, it did not authorize the master to conduct an evidentiary hearing following the DNA tests, or to examine evidence related to the Deborah case. I noted earlier that the DNA evidence did not match Marcellus. The results were shared with all attorneys involved in the case, who subsequently submitted post-testing briefs to the court, including sworn statements from 2 laboratory technicians regarding the findings. However, the court did not convene a hearing to allow the attorneys to present their evidence and arguments. Without prior notice, on January 31, 2017, the Missouri Supreme Court issued a brief order denying Marcellus's pending petition, without providing any explanation. Despite the DNA evidence excluding him as the perpetrator, the court set a new execution date for Marcellus, August 22, 2017. Federal appeals in his favor were also rejected. As the execution date approached, Marcellus's attorney appealed to Missouri Governor Eric Greitens, requesting a halt to the execution and the formation of a board of inquiry. They invoked a rare Missouri law from 1963 that permits the governor to assemble a board to review claims of innocence in death penalty cases. This law had been used only 3 times by governors in nearly 6 decades. With mere hours remaining before the scheduled execution, Governor Greitens postponed it and agreed to establish a board. He specifically instructed the board to investigate Marcellus's claims regarding the DNA evidence found on the knife handle. In his statement at the time, Governor Greitens emphasized, quote, "A sentence of death is the ultimate permanent punishment. The people of Missouri must have confidence in the judgment of guilt in light of new information. I am appointing a board of inquiry in this case." On May 29, 2018, Governor Eric Greitens stepped down following a series of scandals related to campaign finances and personal misconduct. He was succeeded by Lieutenant Governor Michael L. Parson. Investigators in the Eric Greitens administration persisted with the board, requesting further information from Marcellus's legal team as late as 2020. Although Marcellus's attorneys provided the necessary details, the prosecutors did not respond. From 2020 to 2023, Marcellus's attorneys remained prepared to offer additional information, but received no follow-up requests, leaving their client in a state of uncertainty. On June 29, 2023, Governor Michael L. Parson issued an executive order disbanding the Board of Inquiry, which had never released a report or recommendations. The governor also lifted the stay of execution for Marcellus. At the time, he emphasized that the board had been established nearly 6 years prior and deemed it necessary to move forward. Quote, "We could delay for another 6 years, further deferring justice and leaving a victim's family in limbo, achieving nothing. This administration won't do that. Michael L. Parson's decision allows legal proceedings to continue within the judicial system. He assured that once the due process is fulfilled, all parties would have clarity on the situation. However, the executive order did not specify any due process mechanisms. Instead, it expedited Marcellus's execution, explicitly stating, quote, "With this executive order, I have removed any legal obstacles to the lawful execution of Marcellus, including the stay of execution." The following day, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey requested that the state Supreme Court set an execution date. On August 24, 2003, Marcellus and his team initiated a civil lawsuit against Governor Michael L. Parson, challenging the executive order that disbanded the board and lifted the stay of execution. The case centers on allegations that the governor infringed upon Marcellus's due process rights and overstepped the boundaries of his authority. Additionally, the lawsuit aims to prevent the state from obtaining an execution warrant until the board is allowed to fulfill its responsibility of presenting a report and recommendation to the governor regarding the existing evidence. I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that I wasn't able to finish the case in time because 55-year-old Marcellus was unfortunately sent to death by lethal injection on September 24, 2024 at 6:10 p.m. at the Potosi Correctional Center in Mineral Point. His last meal was chicken wings and tater tots. He laid on a gurney, dressed in a white top, with a white sheet draped over his upper body. As he looked at his spiritual advisor, Imam Jalahi Qasim, they exchanged conversation while the sedatives began to take hold. Marcellus's chest rose and fell a few times before he gradually fell silent. They say that he seemed at peace in his final moments. According to the State Department of Corrections, Marcellus received an injection of 5 grams of pentobarbital. His last words were, "All praise be to Allah," in every situation. I'm now going to read a poem that Marcellus wrote called The Superman Syndrome. Quote, "Never wrote a poem about my father. Although near, he wasn't around, so why bother? Papa was a true rolling stone. Maybe the Vietnam War cut too deeply and distorted his view of his own. So forgiving is my heart, I have forgotten much, but clearly remember a beating as our first embrace, our first touch. Some may diagnose it, dissociative experience due to me not viewing this bonding as traumatic. Even the use of bonding to many will be enigmatic. Now behold, here is my father, the first superhero type. Never knew at the time he would just be a stereotype. Still my heart keeps to forgiveness because I can see past the world's flesh. No tears were shed growing up, due to being born with no regrets. Firstborn, I am here adding to his malfunction. I can only remember a yellow dump truck, a bomb pop, and a croquet set without instructions. But when I say he's a master carpenter, I feel a sense of his worth. Then I realize I was never taught such. Abandonment attempts to surface along with shame and hurt. These are just illusions, deceptions, and whispers. Believe me, devils are real. I can hear the hissing. But I ignore them, no doubt, when they spew their fiction. Alcohol addiction, a player in his game. How can one be cured from a disease that eases pain? Writing a poem about my father brought up feelings I never knew I had. Growing up, I never thought of him, so I felt nothing. And even now, it's hard to consider it sad. Now come on and tell me that you understand. How kryptonite can be one's children, so he forgo that part of being a man. The truth is that I know that many can relate. Not so the rectification of my soul. So I refuse bitterness, and I reject hate. Therefore he still deserves respect and kindness as he is the parent. A divinely prescribed order shunned by many, but for my heart, so necessary and apparent. After 2 last-minute reprieves from execution nearly a decade ago, fresh momentum emerged to reassess Marcellus's long-standing conviction from unexpected supporters, including the legal prosecutor involved in his original case. Legal organizations like the Midwest Innocence Project and a member of Congress railed behind Marcellus, and the victim's family from the 1998 St. Louis stabbing publicly opposed his execution. Late Tuesday afternoon, the U.S. Supreme Court decided not to stay Marcellus's execution, with the court's 3 liberal justices, Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, expressing dissent and stating they would have supported halting the execution. Following the court's decision, Marcellus's attorney highlighted the individuals advocating against his execution. and for his release from death row, noting that St. Louis County prosecutors had, quote, now admitted they were wrong and fought passionately to overturn the conviction and save Marcellus's life. Tricia Rojo Bushnell criticized the situation, asserting, quote, that is not justice. We must question any system that allows this to happen. The execution of an innocent person exemplifies Missouri's misguided prioritization of finality over truth, justice, and humanity, no matter the cost. In contrast, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey and Governor Michael L. Parson, both Republicans, maintained that the state had sufficiently proven Marcellus's guilt long ago. The NAACP, which supported Marcellus's fight against the death penalty, described the execution as a form of lynching. NAACP President Derrick Johnson stated, quote, tonight Missouri lynched another innocent black man. When DNA evidence shows innocence, capital punishment is not justice, it is murder. The Midwest Innocence Project, which took on Marcellus's case, highlighted the troubling motivators of the witnesses involved, noting that jailhouse informant testimony has contributed to 23% of death penalty exonerations, according to the National Registry of Exonerations at the University of Michigan. Activists and community members gathered in solidarity for Marcellus, who has insisted on his innocence for 24 years after being convicted of the 1998 murder of Felicia Gayle, despite the absence of physical evidence connecting him to the crime. St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney Wesley Bell, not part of the original prosecution, has urged the Missouri Supreme Court to refer the case back to the St. Louis County Circuit Board for a thorough review. In his statement, Wesley underscored, quote, even for those who oppose the death penalty, when there is any doubt about a defendant's guilt, executing them should not be an option. Marcellus's case has attracted significant support, including a clemency petition with over 1 million signatures set to be submitted to the governor's office. Nonetheless, the governor reiterated that courts at all levels have affirmed Marcellus's conviction and asserted that no legal authority has found merit in his claims of innocence. I'm now going to play audio of Marcellus's son speaking about his father after his execution.
Number one thing I want to say, my father was a very intelligent man, a very beautiful man. He had a connected spirit. Anybody who know about that, I know what I'm talking about. He had a very well-connected spirit and a strong spirit at that. So he went gracefully, he went peacefully, no begging, no pleading, no crying. You know what I'm saying? His time of death was 6:10 p.m. He looked good. He jumped a little bit, but besides that, he didn't seem in any pain. His message was to not uproar, y'all. I don't want nobody rioting, looting, stealing nothing, killing nobody, fighting the police. None of that. We don't need that right now. You know what I'm saying? We're going to rectify the situation another way. They got us on this one, and that's okay, because my father was the best who would have sacrificed for change. So your brother, your father, your uncle, your cousin, or maybe you, it's a less chance of it happening again. We thought we dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's, but these crackers, they did what they wanted to do anyway. But that's cool, because we're going to keep working, get more of our people inside these systems, so we can get these laws passed and we can get a fresh shape. You know what I'm saying? Another thing I want to leave y'all with that my dad was saying, he wants y'all to have a free spirit. Don't live your life off negativity. If you're a father, go hug your son, go hug your daughter, do more things with them, travel, live life. Don't just think where you at, it's the end all be all, because it's not. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I want to leave y'all with, man. I appreciate all the support.
I'm now going to read the statement the Innocence Project wrote. Quote, tonight Missouri executed an innocent man. Our hearts are with the family and friends of Marcellus Williams and Felicia Gayle, who have suffered unimaginable loss and trauma. Marcellus's story echoes that of too many others caught in our country's broken criminal legal system. A black man convicted of killing a white woman. Marcellus maintained his innocence until the very end. His conviction was based on the testimony of 2 eyewitnesses who were paid for their testimony. No DNA evidence linked him to the crime. And the current St. Louis County prosecuting attorney acknowledged that errors made by the trial prosecutors, including mishandling the murder weapon and intentionally excluding Black prospective jurors in violation of the Constitution, contributed to a wrongful conviction. Nonetheless, the Missouri Attorney General's office relentlessly pursued Marcellus's execution and opposed clemency. The Attorney General and Missouri Governor Mike L. Parson, who ultimately denied the request for clemency, ignored the wishes of the victim's husband, who has consistently made clear that he opposed the death penalty for Marcellus. We are profoundly grateful to everyone who joined the fight for justice. As United States Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who before his appointment to the court also fought for the lives of Black men condemned to death, once said, quote, "America can do better, because America has no choice but to do better. It's extremely important that we petition for the innocent because they need us. I strongly advise that you all follow the Innocence Project and look into the many other cases that are currently being protested. Get involved in any way that you can. Most importantly, if you or anyone you know has any information in regards to either case, please report it to authorities, as Marcellus deserves to have his name cleared. It's extremely heartbreaking that an innocent man lost his life for a crime he did not commit. I hope that his family is feeling the love and support of everyone that fought to get him exonerated. I think the whole world is aching right now from this execution. People felt that he was so close to being proven innocent. I also feel for both Deborah and Felicia because their true killer has never been identified, and their family had to see an innocent man go down. All evidence will be linked in the show notes. Feel free to follow our Instagram at Murder Tapes Podcast and my personal at Annalisa. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you on the next one.